Hello and welcome to the Business of Story. I'm your host, Park Howell, and if you are an avid listener, then you know how adamant I am that your story marketing is not about what you make, but about what you make happen in your customers' lives. That's right, stories about outcomes outperform offering messages every single time. That's why I am excited for you to hear today's guest, who will show you how to evolve your boring product marketing into vibrant visual stories. I was on a webinar the other day with PAR, which stands for Professionals for Association Revenue, when I heard one of the panelists mention that January has taken off like a runaway freight train for their business. Now, I had to laugh because I felt the same way. So I'd like to give a shout out thank you to a few folks who have been fueling the Business of Story train early in 2024. First, I'd like to say thank you to Pleasant Middlehoff, who brought me in to help their London-based revenue enablement company called Converter refine their brand story and teach their team how to tell it. It's been a blast working with Converter founder Emma Boquet and their marketing and sales team. Now, I was referred to Pleasant by Raymond David of LG Electronics. Thanks, Raymond, for the referral and for bringing me in to teach your sales and marketing team on how to use the proven Business of Story frameworks at LG Electronics. It's been great fun. A couple of last-minute additions to my training schedule for January. One of them came from Shannon Smithers of Maryland-based Picasso MD, whose team I trained in Tempe. That was followed by a mastery class I did for Brand Outlook in Scottsdale. Brand Outlook is a 22-year-old marketing research firm, and I have its founders, Robert Danoff and Harold Weiss, to thank for bringing me in. Next up on my train is a big thanks to Brian Burkhart, producer of the Ascensus Annual Sales Conference, for tapping me for a 2-hour keynote training in Atlanta. And thank you, Lori Zeman, the Division Vice President of the Western Region for Ascensus, for greenlighting my training. That was so much fun last week. Another shout-out goes to Griffin Cruz, who's head of sales operations and enablement for Wren Inc., the largest provider of 401k services in America. Thanks, Griffin, for inviting me out to Las Vegas to train your sales and marketing professionals on the power of storytelling in the financial industry. I've been having a ball working with Mona Hall of Wren and her content producers on their storytelling skills leading up to their annual sales conference. Finally, our Business of Story train hit full speed ahead when the pitch whisperer, John Livesey, brought me in to work with Green Irony, a tech company out of Tampa, to help them start refining their brand story and learning how to tell it, much as I have for Converter. I appreciate all of you for placing your trust in me and the Business of Story team to help you and your people excel through the stories you tell. And now for you, on today's show, we have an international marketer who knows the power of visual storytelling, especially in the tech world, to humanize what can often be a cold, product-focused approach to marketing. He turned Hewlett-Packard's marketing around when he took a decidedly human approach to celebrating customer outcomes over typically dull product features.
Our CMO kind of tasked all of us in marketing to be better storytellers. This was my contribution. And then eventually this was also part of a bigger plan to really create a new standard for imagery, which I wasn't directly part of, but all this work enabled us to flow into very easily. And now you look at it, you search for a new HP commercial PC or consumer PC, you're going to see a level of consistency in how it's shot, but also that there is a level of emotion that just hadn't been there. And I think that glitz and glamour and polished and aspirational look that had been there for so long still has an application. But I think this small business storytelling for us it was just a great opportunity to tell the story of the product from a perspective other than our own. And I think that's really also what the others who've been successful in this area have done.
Steve Winkler leveraged his early career success in digital marketing to earn leadership positions in Fortune 100 companies. Steve stands out as a master storyteller, adept at shifting the narrative from products and companies to people. His unique approach intertwines storytelling with effective marketing, creating meaningful connections with customers. Recognized for his creative excellence, Steve has earned accolades including 2 Telly Awards, a testament to his ability to engage audiences through compelling content. With a human, relatable, and uplifting style, Steve brings a positive and down-to-earth perspective to the marketing world, focusing on the power of stories to forge genuine connections. So please welcome to the Business of Story, Steve Winkler. Hey, Steve, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, Park. How are you today?
I'm doing really well. How's your new year kicking off? Pretty good so far?
So far, so good. Yes, enjoying a little bit of rain. Hopefully Lake Travis fills up here again soon, and we can maybe try boating this year.
Oh, well, you'll need some water for that, certainly. Is Lake
Certainly
Travis
will.
way down?
It is. Yeah, I think we're hoping to make up for a few years of a little less rain than we need here in the Austin area.
Yeah, our son Parker moved out there with his fiance Jackie a couple of years ago, and they absolutely love Austin. They come from SoCal, the Hollywood area, he being a filmmaker and all, and they've gotten out there and just love this intersection of technology and filmmaking, at least in his world.
Absolutely, and you can't forget the brisket. The Texas barbecue is the real reason to love it here.
It is pretty doggone good. We were out there just before Thanksgiving. Michelle and I spent 4 or 5 days, and we just had a blast running around doing the barbecue thing. And we went to this place called something Follies that is absolutely brilliant. I'll have to remember the name of that, but it's right downtown on 6th Street. And if you've never been, Esther's Follies, and if you've never been there, highly recommended. Very entertaining. They got magic in it. I mean, the talent just blew us away.
We'll have to check that out. Thanks, Park.
Well, you and I got acquainted towards the end of last year. You have been a listener for a while and reached out and talked about the work you do in storytelling. And after that conversation, I thought, you know what? Our listeners need to hear your insights about visual storytelling, especially as you come from the world of tech, most recently Hewlett Packard, HP. And, tech is not an industry a lot of people think about with a lot of creative advertising and marketing. I mean, they kind of fall into that B2B realm of boring to bored. But you've done a brilliant job of really connecting the humanity within your work. So let's talk about that. But first, of course, we need Steve to get your backstory. How do you find yourself where you are today?
Well, it's always an interesting one, perhaps, and I think mine is not unique, but it's my story and it's unique to me. And I think the world of marketing happened for me in an interesting way. In college, that was not the original plan. Got invited to join a startup fresh out of school, and that kind of changed the course. But, I'll even go back a little further. My first memory, Park, the earliest memory I have is one where I was with my father and mother and one of my younger brothers. My mother was pregnant with my youngest brother at the time. They were sitting in the back seat. My father was in the front seat of a brand new car. This was in 1980. He had just taken delivery of a brand new Mercedes-Benz. And that in and of itself isn't a great story, but if you understand how my father's backstory is part of my own, that's what's important here. And I think, At the moment, of course, at 3 years old, all of that didn't make sense to me. All I could tell at that moment was the sheer joy he had on his face. But as we talked about that moment through my childhood, it became apparent that um, that moment was meaningful to him in so many ways. That was more than a car. It was more than transportation. It was a reward to himself and a trophy that he could display to others. And the reason being, he came to the U.S. 20 years before that with little in his pocket other than a few dollars and a few words of English, and achieved his American dream, or his version of the American dream. But it's as I got older that I saw that as a powerful brand story experience. He saw a Mercedes when he was a kid and was just enamored, and that stuck with him. So as soon as he had the ability and the means to not go out on a limb and buy the car he wanted, that's the car he chose. So that fundamentally changed my perspective on even my own career, and that led me into marketing, where I've been fortunate to work in agencies on the digital side primarily for many years, and then moved to the brand side in 2015 for a division of AutoZone, and then in 2017 to HP, where I've been able to apply all the things that I've learned and taught and guided other companies to do, been able to put those practical ideas in marketing in action, and really achieve some amazing and fun things along the way.
So, where did you go to school and what did you study, thinking that you maybe weren't going to go into marketing?
Well, my aspirations had been to go into automotive engineering. So that same story also kind of set off a love of automobiles. So I thought my future was going to be as an automotive engineer. So I was fortunate to get into a great school, Virginia Tech. Came in
Wow.
undecided and didn't decide on marketing. In fact, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And it was toward the end that I got into a great program that's still not marketing, but was really a fundamental experience in shaping, kind of understanding who I was and what was important to me. And that was a consumer studies program. But my degree, which you can see there, perhaps if you're looking, um, doesn't say consumer studies, it says housing, interior design, and resource management. And it's
Wow.
funny how it all worked out. I think it's a major that I might have skipped over, but you meet the right people on the way in college and they help guide you in the right direction. So that said, when I was graduating college, there were a couple options open to me. One of which was a opportunity to join a startup out of San Diego. Jumped in feet first. Huge opportunity to understand the world of tech at the ground level there in 1999. It's also just about the time Google came online, and that kind of set me off on a course of digital marketing, and that's where I've not looked back.
So, what take us to that moment when that opportunity arose for you and your thought process? Was it something you really wanted to do? Were you intrigued, or did you just need the money?
Fortunately, it wasn't about just needing the money at the time. I think it's again a matter of circumstances and sometimes being in the right place at the right time. So an alum of my fraternity had come to campus to recruit for this startup, and we just met casually, and I honestly dismissed this whole opportunity. I thought for me, maybe it was going to be a career in personal finance. I thought perhaps become a CFP. My internship was with Scott and Stringfellow. It seemed like a great opportunity to follow down a pretty safe and rewarding path. So when I first met this uh, person who became quite a good friend later on through that whole process of working together, I paid a little more attention, and I understood that this was a opportunity to build something big, which is probably what wouldn't have happened in the world of finance. So we got to talking, and I started part time while I was still in school in my final semester. We did some on campus marketing. It was a ton of fun. And that led to a full time job upon graduation. So that was a company called College Club. If you're familiar, that's great. If not, you're probably not out of the norm. It was not something that made the waves that Facebook had made just a few years later, but in many ways was the framework that made Facebook successful later on. So sometimes you're just a
Hmm.
little ahead of where you need to be, but it was a great experience.
So, College Club was basically the same sort of concept as Facebook, bringing people, college folks together online. And then Zuckerberg, did he see it? I mean, did he run with it? Was that the inspiration for Facebook?
Who knows? That's a great question. I imagine, right, there's no original ideas in the world anymore. So perhaps Mr. Zuckerberg saw College Club, but I don't know. I think that would be a
Yeah.
stretch to say that. But, all the things that were there were communication and connection. And that was a great opportunity. But, the fun thing about building College Club is even at that time when we were marketing this website on college campuses and college towns, there were a lot of college students in 1999 and early 2000 that still didn't have an email address. So we were marketing an online business offline, something you wouldn't even think of doing today. But it really kind of gave us a good handle of how to manage that omni-channel experience early on, the offline online mix, and that was in so many ways just a I think of it like an MBA in action. But that was a good run there, and that led to a bunch of other fun things.
So when was it? What was that moment when you were working with College Club that marketing, industry, that marketing interest really took hold with you?
There were so many interesting experiences. We were operating a little guerrilla on these college campuses, and College Club had picked up a few national sponsors. Do you remember the Blair Witch Project?
Oh yeah. That was a
Okay.
famous movie that came out that looked like it was shot, real time with just phones. And they did a brilliant job of using social media to market the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah, so our role there, and I don't remember if it was the DVD release, it might have been, or I don't think it was the movie premiere itself, but we were sent these boxes of, probably have one stored somewhere, these stick figures. And to be fair, I've never seen the movie, but I guess there were these symbolic stick figures that were part of the movie story. We were given boxes of these, probably thousands, and we placed them all over college campuses. And it created a little bit of a buzz, but not in a positive way. I think, a lot of people were not familiar, and I would say it was one of those situations where it's easier to ask for forgiveness than beg for permission. Had we asked to place those all over campus, probably wouldn't have got a lot of publicity. But I think the campus newspapers at a number of schools got a kick out of it once they understood it was just part of a marketing stunt. So, but we did a lot of things like that to generate buzz for other businesses, but also to get people involved on College Club.
Yeah. We love the Blair Witch Project so much at the agency when I was running Park and Co back in the day that we really, as a team, examined and explored how they promoted it because it was really one of the first viral marketing efforts online. And then we took the whole agency over to Harkins Theaters and watched it one afternoon, and it was a marvelous movie and really great marketing.
It sure was, yeah. And they somehow didn't get to me because I haven't seen it, but yes, I've heard it's great.
Ah, you gotta see it. You gotta see it. So that kind of hooked you then, having fun in communicating and engaging people in different ways. What experience or what did your work at College Club, where did that lead you next?
So I got into the world of digital marketing by joining this little startup in Raleigh, North Carolina. And the origins of that company were like even Yahoo itself had a directory. So the company was selling listings in this directory and had a lot of organic search traffic. So what was apparent was they were pretty good at figuring out SEO early on. When I say they, I was still one of the, I want to say maybe the eighth person in the company. So it was still small when I joined. And it was SEO that took over as the primary service that was offered, and that became the business. So got involved early on in the world of SEO, learned it, spent my evenings and weekends learning SEO, and my role there was in sales and business development, and a lot of what ended up doing was teaching people. So I was running some inbound marketing, publishing articles, bringing people to the business, but also just having informational conversations with people. This is now 2001 or so, and at that point, SEO had not really established itself the way it is now. It's almost like you just have to do it. But back in 2001, we were talking with business owners, and they'd heard it, right? Just like AI is now. That's what SEO was then. And a lot of the conversations I had, I was just a teacher, teaching what I knew, what I learned, what I tried, what didn't work, and we picked up a lot of business. So over the years, picked up a number of big name clients, and the business grew and grew, and that led to similar work for quite a few years. And then in 2015 is when I kind of made my own debut in brand, and that's kind of where I've always wanted to be. So that was always the goal. But I would say those fundamental lessons in digital marketing, working for big brands, was essential in understanding what my place in the world of brand would be.
And then what was your next step after that?
So at AutoAnyting, it was a role leading digital marketing, and it was a channel marketing role. It was a company that had also grown for many years from a family business into something that was acquired by AutoZone, mostly by its success in SEO. But there was a point where that was not yet. It was no longer paying the bills. There wasn't growth associated with SEO. So the company had moved into, I would say, a lot of success on the paid digital side. But even that reached a point where I would say diminishing returns in a number of areas kept a limit on its growth. So I came in at a time where there was a new technology that just came online. At the time, it was known as Adometry. It was a product that was acquired by Google. It was essential for understanding how to attribute fractional credit for the different elements of a buyer's journey that aren't the last click. So, easier way to say it is, it was a company that had been successful with channels that showed great last click attribution. But if you think about it, those higher funnel activities like display advertising weren't seen as successful. Even if on those small tests you could maybe discern there was a little bit of an incremental bump, it was very difficult to tell whether or not that was a viable channel. So the use of Adometry and some other tools, working with the team, we were able to identify new ways to drive traffic and drive conversion from display advertising. So that was an awesome opportunity to really get involved on the technology side, to understand data at a really deep level. And then in 2017, I got to join HP, and that was I guess the easiest way to say it was an interesting opportunity, because I was thrown into a situation where the problem was clear, but the solution had not yet been devised. So I came in at a time where data was a opportunity to add some clarity to an area of the business that had been working in many ways without data for a long time. And the situation was this: if you think about the customer journey for somebody buying a printer, the printers that HP sold were done very effectively in store, but HP wasn't as strong online. Canon and Epson were doing much better online, and that was across the entire retail spectrum. So after multiple quarters of declining online sales, it was clear that something needed to happen. So with a team of creative problem solvers like myself, we got together, worked with our internal teams, with a number of our channel partners, and figured out that this was really it was a problem twofold. It was a customer experience problem. And as we looked at how those printers were being merchandised across each of those major retailers, it was clear that it was an inconsistent shopping experience. And I think you need to think of this like the way you shop. If you see a product that you like, it's almost natural that we all see if there's a better price, or if we look at reviews at other sites, but we want to make sure we're looking at the same product. At this stage, sometimes it was difficult to tell you we're looking at the same product from site to site. The product titles were different, the images in the gallery were different. Below the fold, information was sometimes there, sometimes it was not. So really confusing customer experience. And this is where competitors had an advantage. So we worked with channel partners, made those corrections, improved the overall customer experience, and We lifted conversion rate. So that's oversimplifying all that went into it and the data that we put into it from our side and our partners did. But it was just a great experience. And that led to an opportunity to move into global marketing. And in 2019, moved into global marketing, forced a short stint on the print side of the business. But then the real opportunity to lead at a global level came in when, in late November, through a reorg, I was given the opportunity to lead a team of omni-channel NPI, and another way to say it is product marketing. And that team was responsible for the end-to-end customer experience of the entire commercial line of PCs for HP. So that was that journey, and I would say the real growth that I've enjoyed, the real opportunity to create amazing customer experiences, all came together over the last 4 years in that role.
Well, what I find interesting is your introduction into marketing sound like it was very analytical in a lot of respects and working with data and SEO and that kind of thing. And then coming into HP and using your analytical chops to understand what the data was telling you and the marketing team about this customer journey and experience. And yet your hallmark, from what I know anyways, is really around visual storytelling. So moving from the data to the drama of marketing. How did you make that transition?
Yeah, so I'm glad you said that. I think in the world of performance marketing, there's very little left to the imagination when data is what makes all decisions. So, but being that disciplined in marketing gave me a really good insight into also how to measure the things that are sometimes less measurable, and that's the creative side of the business. So one of the things that we did at HP, and I don't think it's unique to us, but it's something that I've really enjoyed, is creating great customer experiences. And part of that was using photography in the right way to tell stories. But that's not how photography had typically been used. So one of the big areas of responsibility for my team was creating the global imagery for our commercial PCs, which, if you can imagine, has historically been people dressed as I am right now in a collared shirt, perhaps a sweater, business casual in a corporate office environment, and that does represent a big part of the customers that will use and buy those products. But I also felt that those stories didn't come across in a way that were relatable. Now, when I started my role, it was right before the pandemic happened. And the pandemic changed everything for so many of us. But for production of content, especially photography, for many months we were not able to produce anything. But once we started to be able to produce photography again, there was a thought that we could tell better stories, even with still imagery. So I proposed this to my boss. I said, what if instead of shooting off, creating a shot list off of KSPs and features, we would try to tell more of a story of the business and of the people using the products. And I don't know, maybe my boss was distracted that day, but it was a very much, okay, give it a shot. I thought there'd be some more enthusiasm behind it. It's something I'd really thought out. But during the next cycle, when we were setting up the pre-production for the next shoot, we pitched.
Well, let's do a level set here real quick if we can.
Yeah.
So the ads leading up to this, I could only picture or imagine hero shots of your computers and your technology. The focus is all on the product, on what HP makes, and not so much. It was almost like probably the people are more window dressing. They're just kind of there, but the focus was totally on that product. Is that fair to say?
I think you nailed it perfectly. And that is exactly how people were used. They were the props, and the product was front and center. And that's typically how commercial photography ends up being produced. And it worked for its purposes. If you were to use that on a product detail page, you could exemplify that feature. There's nothing wrong with it. But there wasn't an emotional connection to it.
Yeah.
And I think that was where the turn ended up happening, is saying, this could be something more than just a story of the product. And again, no original ideas. Let's take a page out of marketing history here. It's something Nike's done very well for many years. It's something that Apple took a page out of when they did Think Different. And I think in many ways that's something that has guided my thoughts on this as well. Even in commercial PC marketing, there's something more fundamental to the user experience than just how great the resolution is on a camera or the fancy new keyboard. Those are great things and they're amazing products. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of competition, right, in that market. And there was, in some cases, from the user's perspective, very little to differentiate it when the specs were all the same. So I thought these images could be one of those ways that we could add character and personality to the way we promote products that at least I hadn't seen be done in this product space.
And so, why do you think that is, Steve? I mean, we haven't reinvented marketing here. I mean, it's been around for 100 years, and some of the best ads. Remember that old one that was selling piano lessons? Everybody laughed when I sat down to the piano. Was the headline. And then he goes on and he plays for the cocktail party. I mean, story has been around since the beginning of really solid marketing. And you see it throughout all the great iconic ad agencies. Very little on the client side. It's usually, coming out of the agency world. Why do you think so many customers and clients get lost in logic and reason and data when we all know now that it is the emotional pull of a story that sells things?
I don't, and I guess my perspective is I don't think there was any deficiency. I don't think anybody was not thinking that this was even possible, right? But why wasn't storytelling looked at as part of this? I think in a way it was, but it was all very feature focused. It wasn't about the
Hmm.
human experience, the human side of it. And I think that's where empathy comes in. If you look at the way I look at marketing, right? I think if I were to be on the other side of the table, would that make sense to me? Would that feel good? And as I looked at this imagery, that's not what I got from it. So, maybe it's just a little bit of what I thought, but as we talked about this, as we socialized these ideas, internally, as we saw how people were reacting to this new style of working, that was a little more authentic. It was grittier. We worked in small businesses that weren't the typical Class A office space. It was a very different take on something that had happened, I would say, to satisfy what people thought the image of business computing was, but didn't represent the entire industry. So, yeah, I couldn't tell you why this turn didn't happen before, but I think it was a matter of trying and figuring out what could work. So I wish I could tell you that I had all the confidence in the world this would be the right direction when it started and that it was all perfect from day one, but even then it was a process. So it took a while to get to a place where we got, I would say the real character of what we were trying to achieve.
So take us to that first ad that launched this new emotional driven, empathy driven campaign.
Well, I'll tell it to you like this. So it was actually on a shoot. We were having to shoot remotely through the pandemic, and Australia was the country most open to us for a number of reasons. We had found this great photographer that we've used since, a guy not by the name of Josh Kelly. So he goes by Jack Harlem as well as his trade name. But Josh was able to, through each of these shoots, understand us, understand what we were trying to achieve, and find new ways to get there. And he was more than a photographer. He was extremely involved in parts of the pre-production that we'd never seen a photographer be involved in before. So when he was doing his recce's and looking at the businesses that were available to us, he spent a lot of time with the people to get to understand them. And that was originally with our hired talent. But eventually, when we moved to using the people of the businesses themselves, not professional actors or models, that really his value to the whole process came through. But there was a moment. We were shooting at this motorcycle shop. It was a motorcycle repair shop in Australia. And this was the first time that we were using a place that was a real active business that was not an office space. And I remember distinctly the moment where all this made the big turn. I was watching this shoot over Zoom, and I called a timeout because the set designer was about to clean up a bench in the workshop of this motorcycle shop. And I think there was a muffler there and some sprockets and a bunch of tools strewn about, and it was untidy. But the lighting in this room was great, and that bench was as it was when the actual business was in session, right? So I said, don't touch anything, leave it the way it is. And I think a couple people on my side and on the agency side, well, why don't we just clean it up a little bit? I said, no, leave it the way it is. But it's the shots from that shoot that started to get the conversation going internally and start to really express this big turn that the photography had taken from a very prescribed and specific shot to something that was more organic, where even on that shoot where we were still using actors and models, it was more real than anything we'd achieved before. So that eventually led us through a number of changes and experimentations over the next few shoots until we got to a place where the new rules of the business allowed us to tell the story of the people and the real workers of the business. And that is, I think, what became just a wonderful opportunity to help shape the way people see these products and feel more attached to them, because the scenarios that they saw these products being used in were more authentic, they were more real, and definitely more relatable.
Yeah. So you're not making the product the focus, it's the reader, it's the audience. They become the focus, and they're seeing these very organic, real world settings in which the product, is helping them out. You're selling the outcome versus the offering. And in doing so, did you get pushback initially from the product folks inside HP?
I think any change comes with some risks and perhaps with some lessons. And I think the lesson that the thing we learned happened a few shoots later. The company had embarked on a new overall branding update, and that was on the visual assets that were created. So lifestyle photography had now been encapsulated in this new visual identity. And now there were more set rules that prescribed how we should shoot this work, and that we would use real people. We would be shooting in real businesses. That was done with all the right intentions, and that basically also dictated that there was now a clear line of delineation between product photography and people photography, lifestyle photography, people photography, and being synonymous. And a lot of our stakeholders in the business who we thought had been bought into this new visual identity and the process and how to use imagery in this new way maybe weren't quite there. And it was clear that we needed to change our processes to ensure that our stakeholders were bought into how to use this imagery in different ways. Because, Park, if you think about the way it used to work, a product manager would say, I need an angle of 45 degrees over somebody's shoulder so we could see the privacy screen of the device. And look, that's logical. That's great, right? That really shows that feature of the product very well. But now we're in situations where the person in the image is the focus, and the product is part of the overall story, that they weren't getting that level of specificity they'd hoped for. So initially, the complaint was, well, we can't use this. This doesn't work for what we need it for. And we had to say, well, perhaps that's true. Perhaps the way you were using this doesn't work. But how could we figure this out so that you have what you need? Because listen, at the end of the day, I'm not a creative by nature, though that's been a lot of fun. The work that we do was also not created for the sake of creating art. It was for the purpose of driving business. So if our stakeholders aren't happy, that's something I took to heart. So we talked through this, and it's not that the result was wrong. It's that the rules had changed, and we need to make sure that if we're telling the story of a feature, perhaps just a catalog image will do that for us, or a hero image of the product in a white background will do that for us. But if we're truly telling the story of what's important is that that privacy filter will protect you when you are at the airport cranking out a proposal just before you have to head on the plane, and that privacy filter is important, then seeing that person work on something important where they're actually intensely focused on that and not the world around them and don't have to worry about that, that tells the story of that feature so much better than the old way of doing it. And again, as these things happen, we learn, we communicate, and we get better each time. So after a few iterations of this process, I think we got to a place where there was a level of comfort and ease and I would say enthusiasm for the work overall.
Several years ago, my wife Michelle and I were watching Netflix, and we were watching a documentary on Ralph Lauren. And Ralph Lauren is one of Michelle's favorite designers. I've got so much Ralph Lauren clothing. I mean, she drapes me in the stuff. But it was a great show. I highly recommend it to anybody that wants to really understand how to build a brand. And while the documentary is not about brand building, it's all about brand building as you watch it. And he said something that he really pushed this idea of what you're talking about right here is we don't want to just throw our clothing on supermodels and mannequins and have the clothing be the imagery. We want, and his was primarily print advertising, we want every print ad to tell a story. And oh, by the way, the protagonists in those print ads happen to be wearing Ralph Lauren clothing. Essentially, it's the same approach that you're talking about, but you used it in the HP world to humanize your communication. So B2B doesn't mean boring to bored. It means brilliant to, hey, come on and buy something, right?
Absolutely. Yes. And I think, there are probably a million great examples of where this has happened in different industries. And, the way this came into my world was originally just wanting to be a better storyteller. When our CMO kind of tasked all of us in marketing to be better storytellers, this was my contribution. And then eventually this was also part of a bigger plan to really create a new standard for imagery, which I wasn't directly part of, but all this work enabled us to flow into very easily. And now you look at it, if you search for a new HP commercial PC or consumer PC, you're going to see a level of consistency in how it's shot, but also that there is a level of emotion that just hadn't been there when the process included people who were being paid for the day to use a PC. So yeah, big turn. And I think that glitz and glamour and polished and aspirational look that had been there for so long still has an application. But I think this small business storytelling for us was just a great opportunity to tell the story of the product from a perspective other than our own. And I think that's really also what the others who've been successful in this area have done. And I think that's something that I look back on as just something I'm proud of, and really also want to credit just all the people that were involved, right? I think this came from an idea, but it wouldn't have ever happened without probably hundreds of people that were instrumental in making it all come together.
And when your CMO showed up and said, all right, everybody, let's fine tune your storytelling chops. You all got to become better storytellers. Did they train you, or did you just have to work intuitively about finding out how to tell those stories?
I think everybody took their own approach, and I think they applied it to the area of marketing that they worked in and where they had opportunity to apply influence. So I would say our writers were able to do this in their medium. For me, I oversaw a number of different areas, including the writing. So I know that our writers took that to heart and applied a lot of the same type of thinking to the source messaging that lived with these products and still does live with these products. We've done this across video as well. So I would say everybody's applied it to their craft in a way that makes sense for them. But there hasn't been, from what I understand, a central point of education on how to do that the right way. So I think it's like one of those objectives every year take it and make it great, right? And make it something that's your own.
Yeah. So no formal storytelling training to build a common storytelling language and how to process within HP.
No, but you mentioned that we'd met last year, and perhaps we didn't meet, but my first interaction with you was in 2014, I believe, at the Social Media Marketing World Conference in San
Oh yeah.
Diego. When I think it
Gosh,
was a
that's right.
Sunday afternoon, it was like the first like half day. I drove in
Hmm.
from living in San Diego at the time, drove in and experienced your storytelling workshop, and I can tell you that you know a lot of that was fundamental to the way that I look at all of this. And perhaps it was a major motivator in using those lessons to create, I would say, a new take on photography as well.
That's so cool. I totally forgot that. Yeah, it was probably 2016. I think that was the first time I presented at Social Media Marketing World. And I'm so glad you were in the room. We didn't get a chance to meet back then, but I'm glad it has had that kind of impact on you. So now, Steve, when you are sitting down to create a campaign and you're thinking about the story, have you developed your own kind of approach or process about, all right, how do I get out of my logic, reason brain and into my emotional storytelling brain so that I can, create the stories that I'm trying to do regardless of the product?
Yeah, for me, I come back to empathy and something I mentioned earlier. I try to look at any task, any project, any relationship, any conversation through the eyes of the person that I'm looking to connect with. And if I can't see that makes sense through that lens, it doesn't work. And I think as storytelling became part of photography, as we crafted originally a storyline for our photo shoots, it all came down to a perspective that if I was thinking about it through the eyes of the person seeing this material, whether it be on a product detail page or in an ad or on an executive social post, would that would that feel good to me? And I think that's the underlying motivation for, I would say, how I look at how we apply storytelling.
Interesting. So you apply the filter of, is this real life and how does it feel to me? And you try to find the authenticity in that and then see if you can't replicate that or create that in a photo shoot, in a video or whatever, which I don't know about your experience. Mine has always been that's sometimes hard, isn't it? You see it in your mind's eye, you feel it, and then you have sometimes quite a hard time recreating it.
I would say that's true. And I think if there were a number of experimentations with this, and it was only really when we got to use the real people who use these products in their day-to-day lives that it started to come through. It was super evident on a shoot when we were shooting in Australia as well, on the beach with marine biologists. We were on the beach to start with. We went out on a boat with these folks, and then we even followed them back to their lab. And there was no faking this work. They were using these devices as they were using their own devices, and they didn't have to put on a show for us. And when we saw the comfort and ease in what they were doing, it all started to click and make sense. Like, yes, this is exactly how it's supposed to be. So the stories told themselves. We just needed to insert ourselves in the right scenarios with the right people and the right environments, and it all came together. So it's a really that mixture of both, all three of those things, I should say, which are the environment, the people, and the work that they do.
And then surrounding yourself with storytellers like the photographer that got it and came in and said, "Oh, I see where you're going. What if we could even amplify this effect if we do this or this or this?"
Yes, agencies, creative directors at those agencies, our producers, the production agencies, everyone had to played a part in that, and they were all on board with this idea that we could tell stories with imagery, and that became fundamental to our conversations and really helped us gel in ways that I think I've not seen since or before.
And I would imagine your campaigns got even stronger the more you did them, the stronger the storytelling came out of your team.
Yeah, so it's difficult for you to measure all of those things, and but what I can tell you is you look at how these images are used, and I think the way in which those images are used had changed in this process.
Hmm.
So product photography before probably wouldn't have been worthy of being used in an ad. But the first time I saw our executives using these in their social posts on LinkedIn, it was clear that they were telling stories that the old imagery was not telling. So to see that these images were being used beyond their initial purpose led me to understand that this had a bigger effect than perhaps we had intended. And I think, beyond anything that I have the ability to measure, to see that they became a more prolific part of the overall conversation that the company is having and that executives are having, and that others are using to tell their stories, it became clear that the images had value far beyond their initial purpose.
Yeah. And you underscore something that I'm a big believer in, and I think you've demonstrated it with your work at HP, and that is storytelling to me is the most effective yet underutilized sales, marketing, communications tool across the board in B2B marketing, right? Whether it's technology, services, or anything else, it seems like the B2B world loves to default to their features and functions, their products and service, sharing stories about what they make versus sharing stories about what they make happen that their audiences actually care about.
100%. Yes. At the end of the day, as marketers, we need to win hearts and minds, and we can certainly win minds with speeds and feeds, but it's only when you start to go down the storytelling rabbit hole, which is a great one to go down, that things start to come together and you can win both sides of that equation. And that's where the magic happens.
Yeah. Well, you began this episode by giving us your backstory and how you found yourself where you are today. I know you've turned the page in your own journey. 2024 has opened up a lot of new opportunities for you. What's next for Steve?
I wish I had a crystal ball and could tell you exactly where things are going to go. But, for me, as I look at the future, I'm comfortable in an environment where this type of thinking, storytelling, the fusion of data and storytelling all come together to make bigger things happen. So, I
Mhm.
think everywhere you look, there are businesses that perhaps have done a great job of creating a brand or even a narrative that isn't necessarily a story. So, I hope to take these lessons into an area where it all can create the value of this level and beyond. So,
Mhm.
I'm happy to come back and report where that will be and tell you the stories that come out of that in the future. But yeah, 24 is an exciting time. I'm glad we're here, and I can only imagine that it's going to be a great year.
And to be clear, that you have opted out of your role at HP and have opened yourself up to new opportunities with a company that really wants to be able to accelerate their growth through your experience both on the data backend side, understanding data insights, and then how to convert, how to communicate that data, turn it into drama, if you will, so that you really understand the customer's journey, their hero's journey, and tell the appropriate story from their point of view to hook them emotionally to bring them in to whatever that product or service you may be selling next.
That is crystal clear, and that's 100% correct. So my time with HP ended recently, and it's opened up a ton of new opportunities. So exploring them right now, and certainly keeping the opportunities open to see what will come my way.
Gosh, Stephen, if any listener here says, "Hey, I want to talk to that guy. I might have an opportunity for him," where can they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. So if you know the process there, it's linkedin.com/in/Stephen E. Winkler. You can also reach me by email. It's swinkler@gmail.com.
Stephen E. Winkler on LinkedIn.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, hey, man, thanks so much. I know you've got a lot on your plate right now, and I just appreciate you taking the time to come here on Business of Story and share your insights on visual storytelling to turn the mundane into magnificent emotional connection with audiences. I appreciate it.
Park, thank you. Love the podcast and love everything you do. I only wish every business could make this a part of how they're teaching their businesses to be better storytellers.
Thanks for that, Steve, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Do you know anyone who would benefit by listening to this episode? If so, then by all means, please share it with them. Have you had a chance to leave a rating and review for us on iTunes to help others find our show? If not, then by golly, please do. Have you considered bringing me in to help you and your team excel through the stories you tell with the Business of Story Mastery course or keynote? If so, then by gum, please shoot me a note at park@businessofstory.com. Our show is produced wonderfully by Caden Howell. The music is composed by Darius Holbert, and community development and marketing is by Marissa Hill. Thank you guys for a tremendous job on our show. I hope you'll join me next Monday when Jeff West, the co-author of the new book, Streetwise to Saleswise, Become Objection-Proof and Beat the Sales Blues, will be here to talk about how you create fusion points with your prospects and your customers to accelerate your sales. And guess what? You do that all through the stories you tell. Until then, remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make that one epic. Thanks so much for listening.